Today at ShopDAP.com, I talk about what to do after blowing your MK7 Turbo. The IS20 blew on my 118,000 mile 2015 GTI. It has been tuned since 30,000 miles. Below is some of the damage from when the turbo blew. I have a new steel oil pan, coolant, oil, and turbo coming. I plan to clean out the charge pipe and inspect the intercooler for damage. Any recommendations to inspect to make sure the engine is in decent health? Okay, so this gentleman had a turbo that he blew up on his car. Now, he ordered a bunch of pieces to replace his turbo and then his oil pan already before he posted this, but he was asking for more detail around this. I think there's a lot of pieces to this, so let's start with each one. So the turbo came apart, probably drove for long enough with it being blown that it started to eat some of the pieces of the turbo while it was spinning, and that stuff ended up in the oil pan. The good news, I think, as a general rule, is that most of those pieces went straight from the turbo straight to through the oil return line into the oil pan, which means they probably haven't circulated too much. Now, at least not the larger stuff. The question for him was what to do after you've had this happen. Is his engine toasted? And what should he be looking at to address this issue? So what I would do, it really, first of all, it depends on what your comfort level with taking apart pieces of your engine. So I'm going to give two different versions of this. First thing you're going to do, if you're planning to run the vehicle again, certainly obviously dropping the pan, at least cleaning it out, getting all the metal shavings out, I would suggest a magnetic drain plug no matter which direction you go with this, just so that any metal that made it back up through things, if it comes back out, you'll capture it. Then I would go through with back flushing the intercooler. I had somebody suggested that they used a pressure washer. That's probably, I don't know if that much pressure, I guess it depends on how much pressure you're planning on putting it through there. It certainly works, it just, if you go too high on pressure on a pressure washer, could be a problem. But I certainly would back flush the intercooler, so disconnect both sides and run water and as much volume as you can through to try to back flush it. And then I would take compressed air and then also spray it back and forth through there as well to allow that to dry out. I would allow that to dry as much as possible because you really don't want any water going back into your engine, although a little bit probably wouldn't be the end of the world as long as it wasn't a volume of water going through there. That is the major components. You should take off your boost pipes and stuff like that that come from the turbo into the intake to make sure you don't have any components in there if you've had that type of scenario. You also are going to want to obviously take a look through, make sure you change your oil after you put the engine back together, run it for a little while. I would suggest maybe do a quick oil change and then don't drive it for a super long time, change the oil, change the filter again, make sure you don't have any metal in there to assess that. Now that's option one. Now option two is going to be more in depth. This is the one that if you want to make sure that you're salvaging anything possible you do, because option one, if metal went through the engine and you have bearing damage because of that metal made it through the rod bearings or main bearings on the engine, you could have damage and they could eventually either spin a bearing or just completely nuke the engine if it locks up altogether. If you were looking to go down the road of checking the bearings, you need to remove the rod bearing, you drop the oil pan, you may have to drop the oil pump generally, and then if there's any windage trays or anything under there, and then take off the bearing caps for the rod bearings and inspect those bearings. So take out both the bearings, inspect them, make sure you have them good, verify that they don't have any major wear or scoring or anything like that. You want to make sure that there's no visual signs of wear. If there was visual signs of wear, I would probably then go down the road of maybe looking at the main bearing caps, because if you're in there, you're going to be talking about probably rebuilding it anyway, replacing all the bearings no matter what. So if you're going to do it, you should do it the right way and all the way if you're planning on going down that road. Now, option one, which is not checking the bearings, you're rolling the dice, but also I think most people don't have the skill set to start dropping bearing caps and stuff like that, and putting that back together without causing any damage to your engine. Knowing proper way to put integral components of an engine back together can potentially be a problem. So I don't think that's for everybody, option two, but option one also has risks of your engine could blow up afterwards because it had wear on internal components. Either way, you're not in great shape, but the second option is going to be the best way to guarantee that you don't have a future issue, but could be over your head. So if the engine is going to be done anyway, you can go with option one, but the big difference you have is that if option one, yes, the engine may have problems and need to be either rebuilt or replaced, if things go catastrophically wrong, it could throw a rod through the block and you need to replace the entire engine at that point. So that would be the reason why you would try to make sure you protect the engine and take off those rod bearing and main bearing caps if needed. Now, that is the best option to ensure everything's perfect, but I understand that's not an option for everybody. So hopefully good luck with rebuilding that, and hopefully it works out for you.